Well, I got a new project tonight. This big monstrosity is a MIDMARK 108 trencher. Uh, I've also found out with a little research that I've done, because I don't have no manual to it, can't find a manual unless you spend $100 for it, and I really don't want to do that. I found out this very same trencher can be branded also as a Bobcat. I think it could be branded as a Bobcat T108 because they look identical except it's white in color. Then there's also the name of BURKEEN. I found this information here. So it says here Bobcat, MIDMARK, or BURKEEN, and there's the different models. Like they all use the same parts, same sprockets and chains. So, but I don't know who the actual main manufacturer is. I don't know if MIDMARK made it for Bobcat or if BURKEEN made it for Bobcat and MIDMARK. It's just been rebranded. I don't know hardly anything about it, but I got it kind of cheap, and the engine's been changed. I don't even know how old this thing is, so I'm hoping someone out there that's got more knowledge than me can shed some light on the history of this thing. If someone has a manual, man, that would be great. If you could email me a manual, that would be awesome. That would be really make my life easier. But I'm just gonna have to figure out as I go along. I was able to use it one time. I dug about a 50-foot trench. Right when I got done with it, I went to stop it. When I did, the belt broke, pulleys flew off. Then I got to digging into it. The chain was wore out, so I'm going to put a new chain on it. I'll give you the dimensions of the chain as I go along, what belt it takes. I'm putting in a new idler pulley. So I'm just going to kind of go through it to make it where I can rely on it. Because with all my rental properties, from time to time I have to change a water line, and having a ditch witch or a trencher sure comes in handy. And you can see here's been some modifications made where I believe possibly the original engine may have been a Wisconsin. I'm not for sure. But what we did, we found you'll see this come off of a pressure washer, this engine did. It's a Honda GX390. It's a 12 horsepower. So just in case you come across one of these and the engine's blowed up on it, you got to have an idea of what kind of horsepower you're going to need for it. 12 horsepower runs it just fine. Had no problem digging with it at all. But I'm gonna go through it here and point out all the grease fittings. I think I've got it jacked up. I'm gonna take the wheels off and check the keys and check the wheel bearings, the axle bearings, and all that stuff. Kind of basic operation. Of course, once you fire it up, this controls your speed. You got neutral. You got your little hydraulic pump right down here, and that you got this control valve that controls the hydraulic motor. Somewhere there's got to be a motor. Where's it at here? Let's dig around and look. I see. Oh, there it is. Well, I got to get a light. Let me get you a light. All right. So we got the little hydraulic pump on the end of the crankshaft. There's a hydraulic motor. Drives that chain. Drives the sprocket. It's a live axle. No differential, of course. It's a burger to maneuver around. That's for sure. So you just have to manhandle it to get it in the direction you want. Got a hydraulic filter. You got this mechanism here where you crank up and down the chain, and it takes a pretty good grip because there's a lot of weight out there on the end of it. So you want to keep that big screw greased really well. And of course there's our control valve that controls the flow of hydraulic fluid forward and reverse. Got that. And then when you want to engage the digger, you just drop this lever down, and when there's a belt on there, which I got all that took off right now, and I'll get to that shortly. I'll be putting a new belt on it, new pulley system, or new pulley. And then I'm gonna put a new chain on it that goes through this big, large pulley and a gear reduction, and pulls the chain. And another thing I've got questions about, because I'm wondering how much slack is normal. There don't seem to be an adjustment on this anywhere that I can see. So my assumption is there's just a big spring in here. So, but that would be great if I ever could come across an owner's manual, a service manual. I would know exactly how all that operates. So we're just kind of winging it right now. So I'm going to take the wheels off, go dig up all the grease fittings, get everything greased really well, and we'll just start from there until we get her finished. All right, so I learned my first thing about this monster is it does have a freewheel function and a way to engage the wheels, like a live axle with both wheels drive, or you can have just one wheel drive, because that way it make it a lot more easier to maneuver around. So as soon as I took that cap off, I seen that big gear, then I realized, I see what's going on. See a little piece right there, it rotates. I'll show you on the other side. See, if I had an owner's manual, I would have known this already. All right, see right there, that's in freewheel mode. We rotate this. Okay. Let me try this again. See right there's freewheel mode. Rotate that. Now it's locked in. So you just lock in one wheel or both wheels or freewheel both in case the engine's not running or something other. So that way you can push it where you need to push it. So anyway, that's something good to know. Okay, well that made life a lot easier. In order to get that wheel off, all you gotta do is pull that snap ring off. Everything just slides right off. So I get easy access to that grease fitting. I'm gonna grease that, and I'm wondering if when I grease that, if it comes out on the end of this. I don't know. There seems to be a hole here, but I'm not sure about that. So I'll put the grease gun on it and see where the grease flows. Well, I realize this is not exactly step by step, but you kind of get the idea. One thing to keep in mind to get this arm loose here, because that controls tightens up the belt arm, you have to use a real long extension. Where'd it go? Here, oh, here it is. I use this big long extension because you got to get through it. I'll show you how you got to get that nut loose all the way around here on the other side. You got to go through that hole, and then the nuts is back there. So that's how you get that loose. Of course, you got to take the hydro pump loose to begin with. Get this pump out of your way so you can access the belt. And because I took this apart a couple months ago and that's not getting back to it, but this bearing had locked up. And I got me a new bearing. I got me a new Kevlar belt, not just a regular belt, but it's a Kevlar. And here's the part number, $75.99. I'll link to it there on my website if you need it. And this pulley. Where's my pulley? Come here, pulley. Okay. So here's my pulley, 10143. And I got me a couple different spacers here because I wasn't sure which one I was going to need to make it space exactly right. So let me get started on that. Okay, because I'm adapting a different pulley to make it work, and I wasn't sure what kind of spacing I was going to need. This was the original spacer out of the original pulley, but I couldn't use it because the inner diameter of the bearing is larger. So I do have these different spacers here I can use. One just a little bit different from the other because I want this pulley to ride as close as I can to this metal arm and not rub it. So I'm going to experiment, see which one. There's just a little difference between the two, you know, because that'll make it will ride just above flush. You see that one? Let's try the other one here. What it's going to look like. Just a little bit taller. So I might start with this one first. I'll put that in the vise, go press it in, and I'll see what it looks like. Okay, so here's a tip for you. You know, you never want to be driving a spacer into a bearing. Beating them in there, you damage the balls on inside the bearing. So you want to press it in nice and easy. I just got me a socket on the other side on the inner race, so I'm not applying any pressure on the balls inside the bearing. All right, good and snug. So I think that'll work for me because, see, with that spacer on there like that, it sits down here, it's going to spin and not rub. And that's what I want it to do, is run the back side of this arm here to get that lined up. So we're one step closer, aren't we? Okay, getting you some detail here. And also, I don't have the part number, but I'll get it for you, the part number for the spacer I used. All right, so see, I got flat, a lock, because you want that flat to cover just like that. So that's how you want it to be. So just sit this on the back side and we'll thread the belt and we'll see how it looks. Do some adjusting. So because I'm going with a little bit wider pulley than the factory pulley, I've had to add 2 washers to bring this arm out slightly. So because it was rubbing this piece here as it was pivoting back and forth. So now it pivots, it doesn't rub. We should have good alignment with this pulley. It's getting closer, getting closer. We'll be able to start this thing soon. Just to give you an idea how much runtime that thing has had. This is the bolt that goes right here. And you got this spring right down here that keeps tension on that belt. And the vibration over the years is we're almost halfway into. So I got me a new one to go in its place. So just get that on there, and I'm about to fight this spring, figure out a way to get that in place, then loop the belt on it, and then maybe we'll fire it up and see how it works. So if you just leave the belt off the large pulley, it gives you plenty of slack to hook the spring on. It wasn't no effort at all. Put my bolt in there. Of course, you can see when you raise up on this, that pulls the pulley up out of the way. So I'm gonna have to do some adjusting because you can think this. Yeah, this is this part is adjustable somewhere. I got to see what the adjustment is. And just so you know, this lever here, it actually has an adjustment inside of it. This rotates, and as it rotates, you can lengthen or shorten this rod. So you can change the distance on how high it raises this belt or not. So now that's lifted up, we can get the belt on there like that. Drop it down. We got good spring tension, it looks like. Still got plenty of good stretch on that. So that should work well for us. Now keep in mind, you want to use a Kevlar belt because when you disengage it, this Kevlar belt has to be able to spin on this pulley and not keep pulling it. If you get just a regular rubber black belt, because this is actually like a cloth material over top of it, a regular rubber belt, you know, something like this, it just keeps wanting to grip and grab and pull, and it just eats itself up. So be sure you use the correct belt, or just follow my link below the video here, and that should get you fixed up. Remember how to tighten up that pivot arm. You got to run that extension all the way through to get it back in there, get it snug, then back it off by about a half a turn. Let's see how it does. Yeah, it's operating good and free. Double check it over here. Yeah, it's not binding or anything. Looking good, looking good. Alright, so here, time for the new chain. It takes 30 links. And here's the part number on it if you want to buy you the chain. A 60 HR by 10 feet. And so I got enough for probably 2-3 chains. And it cost me $79 when I got this. So anyways, let me get that slipped on there and we'll start it and see if the trencher, see if it actually digs and does its thing, or at least if it moves. Number one! It's alive! It's alive! That pulley's a little bit grippy because it's been sitting out in the weather and it's got a lot of rust on that pulley. It's kind of grabbing a little bit, but that should wear off pretty quick. All right, now I just got to get my idler in place, get that chain snug where it should be. I just want to do a test run with it, see how it did. So looks like it's going to do all right. Okay, can you see that number? I've really got this zoomed in a lot. This is the bearing on that idler sprocket. So what we got here looks like an 8X0361L. Let me get back to normal size here. So this is that idler sprocket that keeps that chain tight, and it's a special bearing. So in case you need one, at least you got the part number off of it, because if you crapped one out, it'd probably destroy the numbers. It might be helpful for somebody someday. So I didn't know exactly how it was made. It had so much crud on it. I didn't know if it was just a bushing. I wanted to take it apart and grease it, but mine still feels good. It's really good and tight and not dry at all. So that's that little idler arm thing. And of course there's the big bolt. So I'll just put this right back together the way I found it. And I'll put that on, tighten up the chain. And we'll be about ready for the hydro pump. That's probably going to be a pain to get lined up, but that's going to be the next step. Okay, so one of my last steps now is to get this Lovejoy coupler put on there, because I did a kind of a dry run with I just put that belt guide on there without the pump, because I kind of want to do it step by step. So everything else is good, and I just got to get the pump in there. But kind of tricky lining this up, because when the belt guard is in there, you really can't see that you're getting lined up straight, and you can see how these holes have been cut and wallowed so much. So I'll just have to be slow and probably eyeball it from underneath to make sure I get it lined up pretty good. That coupler's kind of in rough shape. The rubber piece ripped out of it, and it was banging metal on metal for a little while. Kind of done a little damage to it, but I'm hoping it'll hold up no more than I'm going to use it for. Something else I added is this wire loom, because I didn't like how those hoses were getting cut and digging into that metal. So I guess what I'm going to do right now, try to get that in there and get it lined up, and give it a final test and get the wheels back on. All right, just show you, give you an idea what I'm trying to accomplish here. The Lovejoy coupler's in there, but you got to kind of get it lined up straight. You don't want to be running sideways like that. You want to get it lined up. So I'm trying to note where my holes are. Try to keep it in that position as I tighten it down and get the belt guide in there all at the same time. Yay me! Well, you know what? I found a problem, because you can see this is some kind of homemade rig. So I want to put this on here. That is not from the factory, I don't suspect. So when I bolt this up, on my coupler here, this here is like above flush, below flush, I want to call it. But anyway, it's not lined up. You can see that this is below flush with this piece. When I go on the top side, it's above. So that coupler's going to be running out of alignment all the time. So I'm going to have to put me a shim between this plate. So I got to find me to dig around, find something to shim it down with. Okay, I just pointed out, I didn't like how that belt was flopping. Sometimes you turn it off and the belt would keep herky-jerky and slapping real bad. So I added a belt guide, because you want to, when it's engaged, of course it's clearing, but when you release it, it supports the belt and keeps it from wanting to go back into a circle. When it bows down real here, down real low, it tightens up on the pulley. Wants to keep flopping and slapping and carrying on. So I took care of that nonsense. So looky there, and I got my shim. I put my 2 fender washers under there. Got that shim down. So now my coupler is lined up. Got that going good. I think the only thing I like is maybe putting the wheel on there and do a couple more tests. We're ready to go. Be ready to go digging. So before I put this back together, I wanted to point out all the grease fittings that I found. I think I found them all. Of course, you got this grease. That what greases this bearing here is this little tube comes up. And there's a grease fitting right there, and then you got 2 grease fittings there that lubricates the bearing. There's like a jack shaft. It lubricates both of those. I guess they're pillow block bearings. We got that to deal with. Another thing I didn't realize that I found it is we got a grease fitting here inside the wheel that could be overlooked, and that's what greases that mechanism, keeps it all in good shape. And then of course also you got a grease fitting here on the axle bearing, and we got some fittings under here for this gearbox, a big worm drive. There's another one back under here. Can we see it? All right, now you can see it on that big worm thing. You see those pillow block bearings in the back. They got greased real good. And I greased that axle back in there. Got that done. What else we got? I think it's got it all around here. And of course you got this big old bearing here to grease, to take care of. So I guess that'll about do it on that part, as far as all the greasing points that I've found. So far, so good. All right, let's finish buttoning this thing up. She's looking pretty good for an old beat up trencher. So I just got to put this big metal plate back on there. It should be the last little thing. And the next hard part, find a place to store this crazy thing till I need it again. But all right, let me get that on there and we'll wrap this thing up. Voila, let's ship it, ready to go. All right, so final thoughts about this thing. If somebody can tell me the date of I like to know when this thing was made. There's a serial number. I don't know if anybody has any history on these things, when they was produced, under what was the original name, all that kind of stuff. But, oh, I found one more grease fitting. There's a grease fitting on the front wheel. I didn't point that out. One last thing I wanted to point out is be mindful of your hydraulic hoses where they're, where they up underneath here. You want to make sure they're not rubbing anything. Those idler arms and brackets, I had to loosen up and move one hose just slightly because this little arm was rubbing it on that belt tensioner. But everything's all bolted up in good shape. So if you find one of these out in the field, you know, pick up maybe a cheap engine at Harbor Freight, and maybe I think chains are still available for them, oddball pieces, you know, basic bearings and all. You probably come up with something, get it going. Handy little machine to have laying around. Anyways, I think that's going to wrap me up. Hope you found that helpful. If you happen to come across one of these things, and if you can shed a little more light on the history of them, I'd appreciate it. Or if you have a manual or something, let me know. Just a tip to show you when you unlock the wheels, kind of clockwise unlocks them, and it does roll relatively easy once you get it unlocked. But yeah, when they're locked in place, that thing ain't going nowhere. But I thought that might be a good little tip to show you. Okay, so I found the spot where I'm going to store it for the winter, and you can see I got the fuel draining out of it, catching it here, most of it in the gas can. Because if you don't, sure enough, you go to start this thing 6-8 months later, it ain't going to start. The fuel will evaporate, leave behind a varnish, and everything be all gummed up. So I'm draining the bowl right there till a 10 millimeter screw. Then I'm going to remove the petcock, drain it also, make sure all the fuel is out of the tank. And I'll wrap it up good in a tarp, and I should be good to go. I just wanted to clarify about removing the bottom of the petcock right here, because that's where all the sediment crud falls into. Let it all drain out completely into my little gas can. And one more step, another step I took is put this tote on top of the engine, keep it good and dry. I'm gonna get me a little tarp or something to wrap around it too, to keep all the mechanisms and keep all the water and stuff out of these controls up here, because it's going to be sitting for a while. Well, there it is. It's not all that pretty, but it should stay good and dry while it sits here through the winter. And so if you know anything more about this machine than what I've figured out already, I sure appreciate shedding some light on it. Thanks for watching, and have yourself a blessed day. See you, bye.